Did you know that Evan Peters' character Jimmy Darling from American Horror Story Season 4 Freak Show is inspired by a real man named Grady Stiles, whose nickname was Lobster Boy? And over his lifetime, he would murder one man before he was ultimately murdered by his own family. If you're a fan of my content and this series where we unbox the real people who've inspired the different American Horror Story seasons, please do me a favor and subscribe to my YouTube channel because I'm going to keep rolling these out. Grady was born on June 26, 1937 with a genetic condition called ectrodactyly, which deformed both his hands and feet, giving him the appearance of lobster claws. Because of this, he couldn't walk and was confined to a wheelchair, otherwise he would have to maneuver himself walking on his hands using his upper body strength. This condition had affected at least 6 generations of his ancestors. Therefore, Grady's father, Grady Sr., had the same condition and was part of a traveling sideshow act. At the young age of 7, Grady's father began to include him in the sideshow. And while the, quote, freak show circuit paid well, it also came with a horrible price. Since starting at the age of 7, Grady Jr. was objectified, harassed, and taunted. So of course this kind of horrific exposure would affect anybody's mental well-being. As Grady grew up, he went from being a kind boy to being a man who was filled with resentment and rage. This is when he starts to turn to alcohol to get through the day. Although, as he continues to work in the carnival sideshow scene, he meets a young woman named Mary Teresa. The two hit it off, and eventually they both get married. At the beginning of their marriage, they're both very smitten, but quickly she realizes that she married a very violent and angry man. As the years passed, the two had 3 children, 2 of which inherited the same genetic condition from their father, and again history would repeat itself. Grady would incorporate his own kids in the carnival act, calling the 3 of them the Lobster family. And just like he was, his kids are also harassed, objectified, and taunted, although they also had to deal with a very mean and violent alcoholic father. While intoxicated, Grady would physically abuse his family. Regardless of his condition, he had incredible upper body strength, so he would use that to his advantage and he would either choke or beat his family. I read in one instance that one time Grady was attacking his wife so violently that his pregnant daughter Kathy rolled a wheelchair in between her mother and father to set them apart, and this set him off so badly that he turned to Kathy and beat her so brutally that she went into labor early. And then by 1973, there's one night where during a fight, Grady would slam his wife to the floor and rip out her IUD with his bare hands, and for her, this was her breaking point. The two would officially separate, and Mary Teresa would remarry another man who worked within the carnival industry, and this only infuriated Grady further. Although when she left the abusive situation, she also left behind her kids in that same environment. So his children now had to endure his abuse directly. They no longer had mother there as a buffer. And as time goes on, his daughter Donna meets a young man named Jack, and the two want to get married. They're young in love. Donna also knows that if the two marry, she can get out of the abusive household. Grady was completely against the marriage, and he told her it's not happening, but she would just reply and say, well, I don't care. I am. And Grady would even say to his daughter, I will kill Jack if you move forward with plans on marrying him. While Donna knows her father is extremely violent, she also doesn't believe that he's capable of taking the life of somebody else. Before the two marry, Jack apparently goes to the home of Grady to talk to him about plans with the marriage, and that's when Grady shoots Jack in the back and kills him. And when Donna faces her father right after this, he just smiles at her in a sinister way and says, I told you I would kill him. In 1979, Grady would be arrested for murder and put on trial. He'd plead not guilty, claiming he only shot Jack in self-defense. Although the legal team who represented Grady used his deformity as a way to gain sympathy among the jury, I also read that his team pointed out that due to his deformity and health issues, a standard prison could not accommodate him. Side note, a lot of his health issues were from a lifetime of drinking and smoking. On top of all of this, Grady spent his whole lifetime in the entertainment scene, so he knows how to put on a show, and that he did for the jury. He would cry and say how remorseful he was about the entire situation, that he never wanted to do this to begin with. And this works. The jury actually only charges him from first-degree murder to third-degree murder, which means he walked free and only received 15 years of probation that he was able to fulfill at home. So he goes home and continues to drink daily and be just as mean as he was before, but now he's cocky because to him, he took the life of somebody and didn't even end up going to jail for it, so he feels like he's untouchable. Then apparently the wife, Mary Teresa, who left and was remarried, came back to him because she felt bad for her children and didn't want to leave them in that situation any longer. So Teresa and Grady try to make it work and they get remarried in 1989. Although when Mary Teresa moves back, she also brings a son that she had with her second husband, who actually doesn't have a genetic condition. So instead, they incorporate him in the freak show by driving nails and ice picks up his nose with a hammer. 3 years go by, and again, Mary is overwhelmed with the abuse and the violent situations that are happening basically daily. And then allegedly, Grady would also say things along the lines of, I've killed once, I could do it again, to basically just instill that fear in their family, which I could understand because he had already taken the life of somebody. But in 1992, Mary Teresa is at a breaking point. She can't handle it anymore, and she is trying to just think of how she could get out of this situation. Instead of leaving, she tells her oldest son Harry that something needs to be done, and she hands him $1,500 to, quote, bring things to a beneficial conclusion. Harry, who had also experienced his father's abuse throughout his lifetime, is concerned for his mother and also understands where she's coming from. So he pays a 17-year-old carnival worker named Chris to take out his father. Without hesitation, Chris would go to Grady's trailer and look through the window where he sees that Grady's watching TV, so he would just proceed to shoot twice, ending his life. What's so sad about this entire situation is Mary Teresa and her children felt the only way to remove the abuse from their life was by ending Grady's life, but this cost them. Since in the end, 3 of them were arrested and charged with murder. Regardless of the documented abuse, the jury did not feel sympathy for them. The 17-year-old Chris was charged with second-degree murder and was sentenced to 27 years in prison, although he was released in 2009. Son Harry, who paid Chris, was charged with first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for 25 years. He would ultimately die there in 2014. And wife Mary Teresa was charged with conspiracy to commit first-degree murder and manslaughter, sentencing her to 12 years in prison, but she was eventually released in 2000. The double standard here is crazy because here, Grady killed that young man Jack and only received 15 years probation that he was able to do at home, but then meanwhile, his family's charged so aggressively. Follow along as we continue to unbox the other real people who've inspired the different American Horror Story seasons.